Welcome to the Ear for Fear podcast, the horror movie podcast that boils and ghouls and dead alike are screaming for. Don't be afraid to listen as Rick and the Creeps bore their way into your brains, slither down onto your arteries, into your still beating hearts.
Hi, welcome to the Ear for Fear podcast. This is the podcast that talks about scary movies. Movies trying to be scary. I'm Rick. I got one of the creeps in the house. I got Jake Poindexter. How's it going, buddy?
It's going well, man. How are you?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for coming on out. We were just before we hit record, we were trying to figure out the last time you were on. I think it was the Let the Right One In episode.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, like last summer, was it?
I want to say it was last summer. I don't know why it's taken so long to get you back on. Maybe just
we're busy people. I got moves to make on the street. So do you.
Totally, man. So again, appreciate you coming on out. Today, you recommended this one, a movie I had never seen, 1997's Event Horizon. So I remember this coming out, but I never went to the theater to see it. I never rented it or anything. And I don't know why. Maybe the only thing I can think of is I'm just not a huge fan of space stuff. I think everyone who's probably listened to the episodes knows I'm not into Star Trek. I'm not into Star Wars. Like, I respect, aliens. I mean, there's some good movies in space. I just don't gravitate towards space, I guess.
I get it. There's an element in horror movies that kind of goes back to psychological and even religious stuff, and technology isn't necessarily the most ideal environment to put that in.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Usually.
But yeah, you recommended this one. Do you while I'm thinking about it, because we're going to get towards the end of the episode and I'm going to forget, do you want to plug anything right now? Lesser Sons, anything else?
Lesser Sons, we got some shows coming up, and by the time we air, they'll probably
be come and gone, yeah.
But we're playing the Green Room with ADD in Placerville on the 8th of April.
Okay. Yeah, so by the time this comes out, it'll be long gone.
Sure.
Any other ones? But I know you said you got another one the following weekend, but anything later on in that, maybe when this comes out, people can go, oh, let's go check out Lesser.
We're going to be getting into the studio here pretty quick, so we should have some kind of recording coming out whenever we get our act together and get that done.
And get everyone together and make the time to do it.
Absolutely.
Where can they find you on, say, Instagram, or I don't know if you guys have stuff on YouTube. I know you have stuff on Spotify.
Yeah,
so
we're on Spotify, Lesser Sons. We've got a YouTube channel with some odds and ends, Lesser Sons Band, Instagram, Lesser Sons Band, Facebook, Lesser Sons Band.
Okay.
Check it out.
So everyone, go check them out. So Event Horizon, I guess before we jump into it, is quick synopsis. You want to break one down, or I can do one?
It's up
to
it.
you. All right.
After you.
Real simple. A rescue crew investigates a spaceship that disappeared into a black hole and has now returned. That's kind of the gist of it, right? Sure. The spaceship that we're talking about is the Event Horizon.
Yes.
And so before we kind of jump into it, let's do full spoilers for everyone.
1, 2, spoilers coming for you.
All right. So I had never seen this, like I said. Watched it the other day, so I'm going to kind of defer to you because you've probably seen this more times than I have.
A couple times.
I guess we could go through the characters really fast and a couple of the actors, because I mean, there's a few actors that are, obviously Miller's played by Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah. I would say him and Sam Neill, which his character is Weir, are the two kind of stars of this.
I'd say so.
Yeah, and then some of the crew members.
There's some good character actors.
There are some good character actors. Some people that I've seen along the way.
Sure.
We'll ramble off some of the character names: Peter, Stark, I think Cooper, Justin, DJ Smith. Claire is the wife that we get with flashbacks from Weir or Sam Neill, which I do want to talk about.
Sure.
a little bit later. But that's, I think, the gist of the characters. There's probably a few other people here and there, but I think those are the main, main suspects,
Absolutely.
so to say. I will say this. I'm just going to jump into it. I'd never seen it, but I had all kinds of issues with this, and I started to do some research because it's about a 95-minute movie.
Yeah.
And I felt there were a lot of things that I felt were either unanswered, or I felt it was just, I don't know, like they didn't explain it, or I felt there was no character development in this movie. And what I had realized was the director, I forget who this was.
Paul
Was it Paul
Anderson?
Anderson? Yeah, Paul Anderson filmed this, and it was 130 minutes.
Yes.
And the studio came in and said, hey, yeah, this is way too long, and it's way too gory.
Yes, there was definitely some studio interference with the project because there was a scene or a lot of footage that was cut of the clips that we see of the crew of the Event Horizon doing just sadistic, gory, I would say Hellraiser type stuff.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was reading up on it, it said that Paul Anderson took inspiration from Clive Barker's Hellraiser. In fact, Clive Barker was on the set as a consultant. I didn't know this until after I saw the movie, but I'm watching the movie going, this is very similar to Hellraiser. Some of them look like, some of the stuff looked like kind of Cenobite stuff. I guess the color palette of the movie, the feel of the movie, it felt. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. When you're looking at the, what do they call it, the gravity core drive, it's very, geometric, and if you look at the details of the engine room or whatever, it has the same look as the lament configuration from Hellraiser. It definitely feels like the room itself looks like the main face of the Les Marchands box that you would see in Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then the result of that engine room doing its thing results in Hellraiser type stuff.
It does. Well, I mean, even I would say towards the end where Sam Neill's character, he looks very much like
he's halfway to a Cenobite.
Halfway to a Cenobite. I mean, he's got like the lines through his head. It's got that pale kind of white look, feel to it. So knowing that they cut, let's call it 30, 35 minutes. Now that's a long run time for a horror movie. That's just, dude, I mean, maybe you get away with that if it's an Aliens and it's some sort of James Cameron type movie who has more probably freedom and liberty to get away with that.
Or if it's 2020 into 2023 and everything is 2.5 hours, no matter how bad it is.
Yeah, that's it too. And I wonder why that is.
I don't
Do you
know.
think the studios kind of just got a little lazy during COVID and just said, just whatever?
Well, people associate 2.5 hour movies with being better movies, so maybe the fact that there's more story will substitute for the fact that it's not a richer story.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I would have been curious to, and I didn't get time to like hop on YouTube, because from what I understand, there are really bad quality scenes from the cut that they did.
Yes.
And it, did you watch these?
I did do a little research, and I discovered that the footage that they clipped, that they cut from the movie, was improperly stored in a salt mine, and so the negatives, did not survive. So a lot of people would say this would be a great movie to have a director's cut after the fact, and we're never going to get that director's cut
because it was stored in a salt mine.
That's the rumor that I heard.
Real? Why would that happen?
I have no idea. I don't,
That's so weird.
who lives
right?
by a salt mine? Assuming it's. Well, I think they did film it in Pinewood Studios, right?
I don't remember.
So somewhere in England, maybe they have a lot of salt mines there. I don't know. I haven't done that much research yet. But
Interesting.
it was, the negatives were improperly stored, so they deteriorated. And
I wonder if I would have liked it more if I would have, because when I sit down to watch a horror movie, I'm a 90-minute guy. Maybe I give you I don't know, 100 minutes if, depending on how I'm feeling that day. I feel like you need to get in and out, but
Agreed.
with this movie, I felt there needed to be more depth to the characters because there was no character development. And I'm not going to say confused. I just felt like a little kind of ripped off. We know Weir or Sam Neill. We're just going to say Weir. He's the one who built this ship.
Yeah, he was the
This is his
lead
baby.
engineer,
This is his baby, right? And this, excuse me, the ship just shows back up like 7 years later or something
Yes.
like that?
Well, should we explain what the ship does?
Yes,
I suppose?
please.
So,
Yeah.
The movie starts out with, not to get off track here, but the opening credits have a very 90s kind of techno, fast-paced, drum beat thing happening.
Yeah.
But the point of the event horizon is that it takes place in 2047, I think.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
And so they start with a little crawl that says that on 2015, the first permanent colony has been established on the moon. Shortly thereafter, commercial mining begins on Mars. And finally, after that, I think in 2040, they dispatch the Event Horizon that is a prototype or a secret a secret project where they are able to achieve faster than light travel, or specifically their gravity drive can open a portal through space and instantly, transport the ship to, I think they're headed to Proxima Centauri or Alpha Centauri. And they take the ship out past Neptune, or right at Neptune, which is what they, decide is a safe distance from the Earth to attempt this. They engage the gravity drive, the ship disappears, and it's considered the greatest space disaster of all time.
Yeah.
So we get to 7 years later, and a little ways into the movie, it's revealed they don't tell them why they're going out there yet, but when they arrive, they tell them that the Event Horizon has suddenly reappeared in a decaying orbit around Neptune, and they're out there trying to, save people.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously it had a crew. I don't know how many people were on it. And I felt though, okay, so and I want you to explain this to me because, again, I only got one watch here. So I'm a little at a disadvantage, and I know you've probably watched this multiple times. Was the ship itself like alive, or was it just there was other things going on the ship, but it's conveyed to us that maybe it's the ship that's kind of what
I took away from it, is that the ship became possessed, for lack of a better word.
Okay. So
the
wherever it
ship
went,
has become sentient, or there is a sentient force occupying the ship when they arrive.
Okay. So it could be either or. It could be the ship itself, or just something that is encompassing the ship that is causing hallucinations, or their like worst fears, or stuff that they can kind of play on them.
That's one of the things about the movie. It's like I go, okay, that's happening, whatever it is, but trying to figure out exactly what it is probably, thinking a little too deep for the movie.
You think?
I think.
I wonder though if some of that 30-something minutes, that could have been in the film would have gone a little deeper and explained more of it, because I felt at times I'm not, like I said, I don't want to use the word confused, maybe a little lost. And I know with some movies that you don't have to fill in all of the gaps, because I think I'm smart enough as a viewer to kind of figure that out.
100%.
But in this one, I kind of felt I needed a lot more. I
absolutely agree with you on that. This movie should or could have benefited from a little more, explanation of where they're at, or at least let you see what happened, what was on the other side of the portal, where did they go, a little bit more of that, which I'm sure is what was in, that cut footage.
You think?
Absolutely.
I think they missed an opportunity if that was the case, where they could have, let's say they get there, right? They get on the Event Horizon and then shit kind of goes south, right? I would have loved for them to have gone into this, wherever Event Horizon had disappeared. had disappeared too, I would have loved to seen that.
Absolutely.
Just other,
Absolutely.
And I just felt like it was a missed opportunity.
And I feel like that is probably what was cut from, the footage that ultimately ended up in theaters. But I think you're right. I think that, maybe it's that when they have to have a character describe, if the Justin character that actually was pulled into the portal of the terrible liquid CGI, and he comes back. If he has to describe you, if you've seen the things that I've seen, you wouldn't try and stop me from killing myself. Maybe it's better that we didn't see that, because I really can't imagine something that I would see that would make me go, oh, okay, yeah, now I get why he's killing himself.
Yeah.
But that, it definitely lacked something. There was some good things in this movie, and there was some bad things in this movie.
Yeah, so I think you and I are probably gonna, differ on our opinion. I immediately felt that this was made for 3D, but I looked it up. It wasn't a 3D film, but did it not spank a 3D when stuff is floating and it comes at the screen?
I just took that as, really the part of the bad 1997 CGI.
Is that what they were still kind of maybe experimenting on what they could do or not do?
Maybe, but I'm not much of a 3D connoisseur, so
I'm not either.
Now that you say it, yeah, that would make sense that maybe those, the watch and the vice grips floating in space.
Or just the
water.
Water, or just the liquid was coming at them. Like, because Darren had come over and he had never seen it. So I said, hey, come over, because, I'm going to watch this. And we both turned to each other. I'm like, was this supposed to be 3D? Like, because there was we've talked about this before. There was this influx of 3D movies. It happened in the 80s. Offhand, like Friday the 13th Part 3 was one. I think there was an Amityville 3 that was one, and there was a few other ones here and there. And then it kind of just went away, right? And that's what happens. Like, they go through this phase where it's like something becomes big again. Sure. And we went through that phase, let's call it 5-7 years. I don't know.
Was it Avatar that did it?
Probably. And then all
Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, dude. And all these films, like, I think there was I want to say there was a Final Destination 5 or 6 or something that was 3D. And me personally, I'm not a fan of the 3D. I don't get it. I can't do it, especially with my eyes, because my eyes don't adjust properly. So I can't even watch them.
Yeah.
But this, I was like, okay, well, this is 97. I'm like, was there this kind of like, was Hollywood like revisiting 3D? Because it just spanked of it, dude.
Yeah.
And so I was like, but no, from what I read it was just they were experimenting with CGI. Sure. They wanted to see what they could do and not do. Some of the stuff I felt kind of worked, and other stuff just did not. And like you were saying, the liquid and
it took me out of it every time I saw the excuse me.
Yeah.
Every time I saw the the objects floating in space, it could have done without them. I didn't need to see objects floating in space or bad CGI, but at the time, 1997, maybe it really did look good then. Maybe. Possibly.
I mean, I'm watching it now for the first time through this 2023 lens, and it's like, I didn't think it was like horrible.
No, it wasn't.
I just felt it was they almost tried too hard with it just to say, hey, look what we can do.
And at the same time, too, it takes you away, like the set design. The best thing about this movie by far was the set design. The engine room, the ship itself looked fantastic. And when it was real, it was there. They could act against it.
Yeah.
But then you have these distracting CGI things floating around, or the water floating around it. And it takes you away from just how brilliant the set design was.
I thought the set design was cool. What I did like was Lawrence Fishburne's chair. Dude. I was like, what is up with this chair? It looks weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seemed like he was very uncomfortable in the chair. And
because his feet were too close together. It looked like he was, a paraplegic or a quadriplegic. And that was how he got around.
That's exactly how I interpreted that. I was like, it just did. You know what it felt like to me is I turned to Darren and I said, it felt like if I was to go to an amusement park, like at Great America or something, sure, and I was to hop on a chair for a ride, because I'm getting ready to go on, and that's what this felt like, just at a lower scale. It just was weird to me.
Agreed.
And then I'm trying to think what else. Oh, there was, okay, I will say this. And I know this happens in movies, but so
I think you're going to say what I am about to think you're going to say.
okay, so well maybe I won't, but I mean there was a scene where they're walking and they go through this kind of circular like entryway, and when he steps, it's clearly metal, and you can see it bend down like it's rubber.
No.
And
missed it.
Darren and I caught it twice during the movie, and I'm like, well, I'm okay giving some sort of forgiveness to stuff because, again, most of this isn't going to be made out of metal. It's supposed to be metal. That's what it's conveying to us. It's metal, right? And so I forgive some stuff, but it happened like twice. Like it's supposed to be metal, and he steps on it, and it looks like
It's like foam latex.
it looks like like that. But what were you gonna say?
And it's just something you notice now watching movies that you probably wouldn't notice then, is just how much smoking was in movies back then. It's they're astronauts and they get out there and they need a quick smoke before they go into hypersleep or whatever. And then the first thing to do when they get out is grab a smoke.
Grab a cigarette.
And it's one of those things. I don't know if the tobacco industry had such a hold on Hollywood back then that they absolutely do not have now, but
Probably.
it's funny seeing people smoke in space to me.
Yeah. There's always seems to be a scene in space where there's a guy or two that is welding something that has gone awry with the ship.
Sure.
And they're up there spending I don't know how much time, and then it looks like just some crappy patch job. And I would think like if we are so far advanced in the future that maybe it would be somehow be more advanced to fix something like that.
Sure.
I don't know, right?
Like some kind of a chemical that you spray that solidifies. Like what was it from Avengers, where Iron Man is able to plug the whole Avengers Infinity War when he's on the alien ship and they blow a hole on it and blow the guy out, and then he's able to just spray something that
right?
Whatever, Spider-Man's web.
I mean, now I don't know if you ever see the commercial where it's that black spray and
Flex Seal.
Flex Seal. Do you know I got Flex Seal in the future? Like, I don't know, man. Something.
At least something to plug the hole temporarily so you can put something else in there.
Right?
But yeah.
I mean, I understand if this is big gaping hole, right? But if it's something kind of on a smaller level, I would think by 2040 something or whatever it is, they're so advanced that they got something. I mean,
yeah, they have to have dealt with, hole breaches, at some point.
If you can somehow manipulate where you can bend time or whatever the hell it is, like he was explaining it, Weir was explaining it with the piece of paper, I would, if you can do that and develop the technology to do that, you would think you would have something to patch it.
I would think so.
I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just focusing on it too.
Maybe we're being too critical of it, but at the same time, something that takes you out of the movie is worth talking about. So
yeah. So they get to the you could tell Weir is very he's not really forthcoming on why they're going.
Yes.
Miller, or Lawrence Fishburne, is the captain, I assume, of this ship. He's got all of his crew, and they're a little put off because they were on some sort of leave.
Yeah, it was a last minute, job that they all got pulled from. I think what was Kathleen Quinlan's character's name? Peters. He stops by her and tells her, "Hey, I was trying to get somebody else. I know you're missing time with your kid."
That's right. Yeah.
And she said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to get him for the summer. We're going to be okay." And it was a good way of telling you that she has a kid, because that's going to come into play later. So
for sure. And so we're not quite. I mean, we're not quite sure what Weir's his whole reasoning on wanting to get to the ship. I mean, I get that he supposedly is sent there by whoever. Let's call it whoever it is. I don't know if it's not military, is it?
Yeah, is it the Federation? Who knows?
It always seems to be military involved, right? In these movies,
or at least ex-military people. The way that the ship's command structure is set up, seems like it would be derived from military.
Yeah, and so he's not, like I said, he doesn't really give them a lot of details. But you feel there's some other ulterior motive here. Now, I will tell you this. This is what I initially thought, and I kind of wish they would have went this route. Was when we kept getting the flashbacks of his wife,
Sure.
I thought maybe his wife was part of the crew and they disappeared.
Something like that, and something like that, not just for Weir's character, but also for everybody on the ship, would have been good. Like, they needed something. You find out that she died. Later, you find out that she killed herself because he works too much. So he's carrying something around. And that's what I think, Peters, Kathleen Quinlan's character, she's got something that she's carrying around with her, and you get that. Lawrence Fishburne's character has something that he's carrying around from his past. You don't get that for the other characters.
No, and that's what
So,
I was like, because there's a scene where there's one, and I can't remember which character it was. I don't know if it was Smith or maybe DJ. When he pulls the scalpel, I was like, he went to like 100 really fast.
Absolutely.
What happened there? We don't get any explanation. I felt it was out of place for me.
And it was something that might be going on with him because of the ship that we don't get any payoff for.
There's no explanation to it. Like, we don't see, like, was there a scene they filmed where it feeds off of something that happened to him, something that he regrets, or something that he weighs on him, and they cut it.
Yeah.
And so then it would have made sense on why he went there so fast, because it just was odd to me.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, what the hell's happening here?
I think with each of these characters, what they needed was something dark in their past that they are bringing with them. There is a guy, Movie House, who does a really, really good breakdown of this film, where he's talking about one thing it suffered from was too many characters. And he said that every character should have had something. They could have introduced a religious element to it. Like, one of the characters should have been a devout Catholic or something like that. I think those were absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Movie House, check them out.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just the thing is with a movie like this, okay, with as many characters as there was, we don't need a ton. We don't need this huge exposition of each of them.
You need something.
It could be they're wearing a cross, right? A picture that they pull out and they see whatever it is. Anything like that, the audience is smart enough to be able to fill in the gaps.
Absolutely.
But there was none of that with this.
And maybe it was there and it got cut.
That's a shame, because I mean, I think the movie could have been, at least for me, a lot better, because I had so many. I felt, and this is what's interesting, because I've seen most of these actors in other films. I mean, come on, Lawrence Fishburne is phenomenal. He's been around for years. So is Sam Neill.
I actually don't like Sam Neill all
Really?
that much. I feel like Sam Neill is the only actor that I can tell when he's doing a bad American accent.
Oh,
Or like
okay.
in Peaky Blinders, like
Yeah.
I feel like he does a bad Irish accent. But I've never been a huge Sam Neill fan.
No, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I remember him from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
The franchise. I think he did like part 3 as well, if I remember correctly, In the Mouth of Madness, which we've done on this podcast. I don't have an issue with him at all. I felt this film was wasted on both him and Laura, really all of them. I felt the acting was really bad, which I was surprised by. I felt the dialogue was just elementary. It was bad.
Yeah.
I found myself laughing at some of the dialogue. And that typically doesn't, if I'm watching a real low budget piece of crap horror movie from, say, the 80s or something,
Sure.
I understand I'm going to get bad dialogue here, because it's probably made on a couple $100,000 budget with people that have never acted before.
Which doesn't make any sense, because the writer is probably the cheapest part of the film process. Like, hire somebody competent.
Right? I went into this movie, I really wanted to like this, because I'd watched the trailer, I'd looked at like stills from the movie, and I'm like, this looks cool. And like, how did I not see this? The only thing I can think of is just when it came out, people are like, yeah, this movie's not that good, and I just stayed away from it.
The reason why I checked it out again was a couple of months ago, I just kept seeing, I think it was probably around Halloween, and I ended up on YouTube going through people's top lists of scary movies.
Yeah.
And I noticed that it wound up on a lot of people's
Really?
top 10, top 5 lists. And I'm like,
Wow.
I saw it back then. I don't remember too much of it, but I do remember it looked great. The set design, the physical elements of that looked great. So I'm going to give it another look. And I was underwhelmed, but I do think it ended up being a competent movie. Mid-level,
Yeah.
but it could have been so much better.
I think, yeah, because I looked on IMDb and they gave it like a 6.6. I'm like, how did that get a 6.6? Like, there are other movies that I thought were way better that got a lower rating, and I'm like, and I never know, who's giving these reviews and what they're, and I understand that everyone is different than me, and that's great. And maybe because I am not a fan of space, so maybe I wasn't as forgiving with the stuff that I saw. If this was, say, on like land,
did it need to take place in space? Could you take the premise of this story and set it in the Australian outback, and so it becomes a desert island type movie? We're going into this place that's completely out of the way. Not too many people can get there. Maybe it's deep in the Amazon, and there's a tribe in there, and it's something along those lines.
Perhaps I believe that the story itself has a lot of promise to me. Like, I felt like I get it. Like, I thought it was kind of creative and kind of cool, but then I just felt the execution for me it left a lot unsaid. I just was like wanting so much more. Like, I couldn't. I sat there going, the dialogue was so just terrible for me. Like, I'm like, who the hell wrote this? Especially with these really good actors you have.
Sure.
And then just the way they portrayed the characters. I don't know, man. It just felt like a mess to me. And I was surprised. And again, it could have just been all the stuff that they cut out. Maybe it would have just added more, and it would have, it kind of filled in the crevices for me, and maybe it would have gelled more. But
I think it really did suffer from having too many characters. There were too many people in this movie, and that's probably why the dialogue, suffered as much as it did, because there were just too many. There were too many people that had to get words in.
Yeah.
Smaller crew might have been
maybe, but if you think about those types of movies, let me think offhand. Aliens comes to mind.
Sure.
Or Alien comes to mind. I know there's other space, but if you think about it, there were about the same amount of characters in Aliens.
Yeah.
I think the only difference, though, is
one by one, all of those characters got killed. And, another thing about this movie is how many people survived to the end? Like 3?
Two?
Was it 3?
I want to say it was Cooper and Stark.
And
but I forgot about. So towards the end, I'm like, did Stark die? Because I can't remember now. See, I shouldn't have to.
I don't think she died.
No, she didn't. But towards the end, before it was over, I was like, is Stark still alive? I shouldn't have to ask myself that watching a movie. I should know.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Or the ambiguous ending too, which we can talk about when we get there. But
so they get to They get to the Event Horizon. The idea is we're gonna, Miller and some of them are gonna go onto the ship, but they want Weir to stay back because they're just not sure what they're gonna come across. Yep. And he's very adamant about getting on the ship. And they get on the ship, and then of course, weird stuff starts happening. Sure. I guess.
I guess you could talk about the layout of the ship too, and there are two main sections. There's kind of the engine section where the gravity drive is housed, and then a long corridor that leads back to the bridge and the
I guess all of the other
absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe there was a medical room or some. I actually I really dug the design of that room. If I could say anything, I would say that was really cool.
Absolutely,
it felt futuristic, and it felt like it wasn't like they put in some time and thought into how they built that. And I think the idea is the way this thing was built, right? Is there's these explosives, and if something doesn't go right, you can activate these explosives and break the ship in. I'm not going to say really half, but it breaks apart. But
then the front section can be used as to get you back home.
But
A lifeboat, if you will.
If something went bad with the initial crew and they knew something wasn't right, why didn't they do that?
I think.
Did you think it just happened so fast?
I think it just happened so fast.
So they didn't have any time to react.
Whatever happened immediately upon folding space and going into the what is implied but never said. They call it the hellish dimension online a lot.
The hellish dimension. I
I
would
just
have
think
loved if we would have saw that, man.
Yeah, and I just it doesn't make sense to me to have explosives lining the entire thing. Anyhow, like. Maybe they could have come up with some kind of a mechanical release to just do that. Like the explosives, I felt like if the story had been so that somebody had placed them there, maybe, I don't know. It's another one of those plot quirks that
well, but it's done intentional, right? Because of course the explosive comes into play,
of course, later
in the film, and so they have to introduce that it's a thing, and then
absolutely,
and then
it's Chekhov's gun.
Yes, Chekhov's gun. So I mean, yeah, they immediately get like bad kind of juju, right, with what's going on in the ship. They get like visions.
I think Peters and Miller head toward the front of the ship, the crew quarters or whatever, and Justin heads towards the back. He heads toward the gravity drive, right?
Yeah. So why was this? And again, maybe this was explained. Why do they keep calling him baby boy? Hey, baby boy.
I think that was just something that they were trying to give these two characters some kind of camaraderie, and
it felt awkward to me.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. So
Cooper's character to me was just far too upbeat the whole movie. He was just too bubbly. There was it was a choice by the actor, and he didn't, his attitude and his disposition was just not, it was bubbly almost.
Did you feel it was kind of, because in these movies there's always that like comic relief, right? There's always at least one man or woman that is, and I think that was him.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was too much of it. It was over. I found his character very annoying for me, at least.
It was LL Cool J in Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. That one I would argue worked a little better, but
well, yeah, he did great.
He did.
He actually survived the movie because of how his character was performing on screen. So.
Yeah. I mean, so Justin goes into what's the room where this I don't know what you call this reactor. I don't know what this thing is.
It's
what
the engine room, or
the kind of the brain, right, of the ship.
The heart of the ship.
The what?
It was the heart of the ship.
There you go. The heart of the ship. And he goes in there. Did he go to like touch it and then get sucked into this? Why do people always feel a need to?
I don't know, but I mean, I can't say I wouldn't do something like that if I was in that position. But at the same time, he goes into the gravity drive room, the engine room, or whatever, and he sees the orb or whatever, move around, and suddenly the lights go on. It lines up, and suddenly there's this wall of bad CGI liquid of some sort. So of course, as anybody would, he approaches it. He sticks his finger in, and then sort of sticks his whole arm in, and then somebody or something grabs him, and they have that moment that we all knew was going to happen the second he stuck his finger in that thing. He gets pulled in, and the leash or whatever that he's on starts running back, and so Cooper immediately sees that he's moving too fast, he's in trouble, and then he takes off after him.
So at what point when he comes out of this, because doesn't Cooper go in to kind of get him, right?
Yes.
But he's coming out of the hole at the same time, so he grabs them. Is that when there's that explosion?
That's, at the same time that happens, and Miller and Peters are up front. Miller's, looking around for survivors or whatever. Peters apparently is going into the ship's computer to try and get any data that might be in there.
That's right. Something that might have been stored or something. Yeah.
And I think she has a moment where, a CD or something is coming out of the computer.
She can't pull it out.
She can't pull it out. But so Cooper is going after it, and just as he gets into the room, Justin reemerges from the portal or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Kind of collides with them, and he catches them.
Oh, that's
and at that moment, Peters is working on restoring gravity, artificial gravity in the
that's
atmosphere.
right.
So
Yeah.
that's why shortly after Cooper grabs him, all of the floating water and everything suddenly crashes to the ground.
That's right. Yeah. Then don't they come crashing down?
They come crashing
I'm trying
down.
to remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Justin is obviously catatonic in some form.
Yeah,
So-
well, whatever he's seen is so, and then I mean they do whatever they can do to try to revive him or see what's going on, but
But at that same time, some kind of an energy pulse or explosion, I wouldn't say, but some sort of energy pulse comes out of the portal. It runs through the entire ship, lots of explosions. There's a cool part about the explosion that we'll talk about, but it travels all the way through the Event Horizons corridor and ends up hitting the Lewis and Clark, which fries everything. There's lots of, sparks and explosions. And
I think there was a fire, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't there a fire?
there's
They had
fire.
fires and
damages the hull. That's what punches a hole in the hull.
that we talked about. Do you think when he went in and came out is when it was released? Do you think that if he hadn't gone into let's call it the hole, do you think it wouldn't have disturbed anything and everything?
Maybe, but then we don't have a movie, right?
I know. I'm just curious. Or was it just always there?
We don't know what. I mean, obviously, we're going to go with that. The ship is possessed in one form or another. So at some point, it was going to make a move to damage the ship, because what the end result of that was that the Lewis and Clark, they could no longer occupy it. They had to put the fires out, and they had to get off the Lewis and Clark and get onto the Event Horizon. So,
which is what the ship wanted.
sure.
But what was so, and again, I know this is probably
That's where
stupid.
we could have, there was no explanation of what this was. There was just plot points moving forward.
I mean, if the ship is alive, right? It's some sort of entity now. What's its end game here? Is it just to get bodies and it somehow feeds on what is the purpose of it?
It's just, I don't know, it's pure evil.
It's just pure
it's
evil.
Pure evil. Anybody that comes across it, it's gonna get killed and tortured and terrorized.
Because I mean, they make them, they manipulate them. They kind of they cause hallucinations. They play on their insecurities or stuff that like with Peters, it was her son. We get the impression that his health isn't great, and that I mean,
think maybe he's paralyzed.
Yeah, that would explain when she goes into that kind of medical room and there's it looks like almost like a tent.
Sure.
And she sees someone moving around and she pulls it off and
it's like the tent from Mad Max when Goose is in the tent. Yeah. But yeah, she goes in and she sees him. And she pulls opens the tent or whatever, and it's her kid acting like a toddler. Well, that was another one that took me out of it, where he's like, "Mommy," and you're like, that kid's like 12.
Well, that's what 12. Yeah, and then the legs look deformed,
He's got lesions on his legs. And
so I guess we're to assume maybe he had an accident.
Possibly.
So that's what the ship is playing on her that way. I know with Miller or Lawrence Fishburne was that he had we get this kind of story where he had left a fellow.
Sure.
Was he the captain at the time? I'm trying to remember the story.
I would
he
imagine
told.
so. Yeah, I mean, there was some sort of an emergency, and in order to save the rest of them, we've all seen that in a space movie too. You got to lock somebody out to isolate the fire or the disaster, and he had to leave somebody behind.
Yeah,
and he watched that person
burn to death. Yeah, and so we get that throughout the film where it's like the ship again is playing on it, and then a little bit with Weir as well with his wife. We still get all these kind of like visions or flashbacks with her. There was a scene in one of it in the room that he was in where she was there and he was trying to talk to her, but of course, he's just imagining it.
And his started at the very beginning before they came out of hypersleep. So he had the first vision when they were all still in, what do they call it, stasis?
Yeah.
Where he comes out and it's the oft memed, him screaming, the Sam Neill screaming that you see in memes all over the internet. I'm not going to do it, but.
So Jake, because you're more familiar with me than I am when it comes to space, okay? Why is it that they have to go into that, say that, all of them, they're basically stripped down and they go into some sort of whatever liquid, or this looked like water to me. What is that to stop? What is the purpose of that? Are they going through like
Which
some
part?
Okay, at the very beginning, and you see this in all the movies, right? It did this in Aliens, where they all kind of strip down, right? And they're in like, let's call it their underwear and
you're
bra.
talking about the stasis part,
Yeah,
right?
well, tell me the purpose.
They explain it in the movie that when the engines, engage and they take off, they're going to be doing something like 30 or 300 Gs.
Okay.
And unless they were in some kind of a liquid going out, it would crush. He said it would liquefy your bones. So
I don't remember.
It's
they
something along
explain that in the movie.
Yeah, it's a beginning. So
I don't remember that.
when they're just getting ready to go into stasis, when Sam Neill. Oh, Sam Neill. No, I was gonna say, what was his name from Jurassic Park?
Oh, I forget his damn character's
Whatever.
name. Yeah, his character's
So
name,
he's
yeah.
going and he's trying to introduce himself to Miller and thank him for letting him come along, and he keeps being very curt with him and cutting him off and just being the clock is ticking, we got to go. So just as he's getting ready to go into stasis, and I think Cooper asks him, "Are you claustrophobic?" He said, "Very." He's like, well, all right. So they got to go into that. So the liquid, saves them or protects them from G's that would kill them.
Because I know in other movies they do that.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is, have you ever heard of the 3-Body Problem?
No.
Really great book series, and it's about an alien invasion. We won't get into it, but when it takes place over hundreds of years, and so they are the technology is moving forward, that they're creating spaceships to protect themselves against this alien invasion that's going to come in like 400 years. And one of the things they talk about, I don't know if they talk about it, if they do, is they, encapsulate the entire thing in liquid so that you can stand the G's of traveling through space. But
I guess that makes sense. That makes sense.
It makes sense. It's there.
I just was always wondering, because I just don't know enough about that. Because, like I said, I'm just not a huge fan, and so I'm never really. And I didn't even hear them explain that in the movie. I guess I just I don't know. It just went over my head or something. I just didn't hear it. But I always was wondering that, like, and it makes sense when you explain it. Like, okay, if you're going that fast.
When you get into science fiction, it's nice to know that the people that are making the movie are doing research with real scientists, and at least doing a minimal effort of, okay, if we are going out into space, what do we need? What would this be like? What's the most likely scenario of how we would do this if we are fast forwarding 50 years, right?
Yeah. So, okay, it's interesting you bring that up, because when Darren came over and we watched this, and we were talking after the movie, we were talking about stuff, and he said he was talking about the explosion, because in space, with it being zero gravity,
zero air,
there's no oxygen.
Yeah.
So when there's an explosion, you're not going to hear anything. It's just like
you would on the bridge, and that's the same. You can go back to Star Wars and the sound of the TIE fighters and the X-Wings. Like, there would be no sound in space.
But it's not as cool if you don't have it.
It's not as cool if you don't have it. But there was that great scene, and I'm pretty sure I read that this actually happened. They had an accident on set, and it was Jolie Richardson. You can see it in the movie, and I was giving it another breeze through last night, and I kept pausing it right on this moment where Jolie Richardson and Sam Neill are sitting at a console, and it's just as that pulse comes through the ship and everything blows up and catches fire. But you can see an explosion come out and hit Jolie Richardson right in the face.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, it cuts to Sean Pertwee Smith, with a cigarette in his mouth, might add, falling back, blowing up, falling back away from the console that's blowing up, and then covering his head and doing a good roll. And I'm like, they weren't acting there. I don't think they were acting there.
No?
I think that was an explosion that they weren't ready for.
Really?
If you give it another watch, just pay attention to that
check
part.
that out. Yeah.
It looks like a legit, this wasn't supposed to blow up this close to my face. So.
That, unfortunately, those types of things happens a lot on set when there's accidents. Like, you're like, holy shit. Like, I forget what movie it was. I think it was Morris and I did an episode. Oh my God, I can't think of the movie right now. But one of the women actors, she was supposed to go through. She was banging on a glass door, and it was supposed to be a breakaway glass, but it didn't, and she ended up cutting the hell out of herself and required all kinds of surgeries, and where she went and actually sued them because of
that wasn't Blade Runner, was it?
No, it was a horror movie that, and I'm trying to remember what episode it was. Morris and I did the episode, and I can't think of the damn movie right now. It was from the director of Martyrs, and I can't. Jesus, I can't think of what movie it is.
Well, you've always got the classic story. Classic. I'm being a dick now. The Twilight Zone movie. The actor who was actually decapitated by the helicopter.
Oh yeah. When I forget. I always forget his name. And then the two kids.
Yep.
And
then you've got The Crow, obviously.
Obviously with Brandon
Lee loses his life. And most recently, Alec Baldwin shooting the director of photography on that movie Rust that probably won't see the light of day.
I don't think
these things happen.
Yeah. No, I know. It is.
Like a movie set must be an ocean nightmare.
Yeah. Oh my God, right?
One thing I've always thought, this has nothing to do with the movie, but there are certain things that might happen in a film that, even though they're acting, has to qualify as some sort of workplace violence, right?
Yeah.
You got, people accidentally getting punched or somebody being choked or anything like that. And it's just interesting to me that nowadays, movies seem a little more sanitized to me nowadays, whereas back in the day, like they were like, "Fuck it, let's do it. Let's just do it."
Sure, yeah.
And if the actor's really terrified, that's even better.
Well, I mean, I think back, let's call it, I don't know, 30 to whatever many years ago, there's less repercussions.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I mean, this is going back to Kill Bill, which I know is not 30 years ago, but I mean, the damage that it did to Uma Thurman's back,
Absolutely.
I believe, But I mean, hell, let's go back to The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
The lady who played the witch she was burnt, man.
Yeah.
And then the makeup that was, this was all new to them. Yeah. And it ended up causing, when they were going to the Emerald City and all the poppies were filled with asbestos because they didn't know any better.
Right.
How many of them probably died because of it, man?
You can't be too careful when it comes to an artistic endeavor. Same problem I have with country music these days is I want to hear music from people that have drug problems and accidentally killed a guy, That's the stuff I want to hear. Whereas everything now, nobody's, addicted to anything. Nobody's got a checkered past. They're all,
I feel it's
a little too sanitized.
I think the last few years is become a little cautious and careful not to piss people off. And so like I feel there's gloves on all the time, and hopefully sooner than later we kind of get out of that. And I get it. We go through what we did, with COVID and everything, and not to mention all the other stuff. I mean, we're not going to get into politics, but all the other, the rest of let's just say the world, right? The war and just the state of our country and stuff like that. People get very uneasy and they don't want to give you some sort of entertainment, right? Here is your movie or your television show, and we don't want to remind you of what's going on. So I feel people have been very cautious, not everyone, very cautious of what they convey or in music and in movies and anything else. I feel commercials have become so we got to do this and this to somehow portray an item. And I'm not going to get down in the weeds on what that is, but I think some of the people who watch commercials these days and know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, well, we got to do this and we got to do that because, we don't want to piss off someone and we don't want to make someone uncomfortable. And it's I don't know.
I think it's interesting that I think, long story short, what I want is I want to see cigarettes in movies again. I want to see people doing it, but to a degree anyway. But I think it's, God forbid we explore any ideas that might make you uncomfortable, and that it's kind of a little bit of a switch nowadays from then. when a movie like The Exorcist or Hellraiser came out, at the time that they came out, I think, the majority of the country were probably coming from some sort of conservative religious, background. And so when they make a movie like that, it's challenging the status quo. I don't think doing that, making that kind of movie, making the movie that's sex and debauchery and gore and violence, I don't think that's as offensive now as it was back then.
Yeah.
Whereas back then it was, I would argue that it was braver to make that movie then, given the nature of the country in itself. Whereas now, if you try to think of what would be, what would challenge the status quo, I just think the status quo has shifted, and that Overton window is a lot further left. So when people make a movie that they would call brave, now, it's not the same thing. It's preaching to the choir. It's everybody, you make a Hellraiser now, and we're like, yeah, but I wouldn't call it brave. They're preaching to the choir. Or like if you were to make a movie about priests molesting kids now, we're like, yeah, we all know that priests molest kids. We've been making that movie for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And back then, they weren't making that movie, so it was brave. There was an institution that you're kind of speaking out against. Yeah. Nowadays, it's like, everybody knows.
Yeah, I think it's the whole taboo thing, right? Like, there's certain, again, you mentioned Hellraiser. When Hellraiser came out, there wasn't really anything, like that. And I was, when I watched it for the first time, I felt very uncomfortable, and it was very unsettling for me. And I can't remember, was that 87? Do you remember when Hellraiser was 87? I can't remember.
87 sticks
87
out.
Sounds right. So I'm 15, and I didn't have a lot of stuff to kind of base. Even though I'd watched horror movies a lot, but Hellraiser was very different than everything else. And so it kind of went against the grain.
Yes.
And nowadays, is there really anything that goes against the grain that we are not, because we're so subject to social media, and there's anything and everything you want to find, you can find literally on your phone, right?
Right.
So now, and we've talked about being desensitized. So it's like, I don't really watch something and go, oh man, that made me, there's been a couple movies
that made me uncomfortable.
That made me, Hereditary's one, The Dark and I think The Dark and the Wicked, Saint Maud. Again, all three of these we've done episodes on. But I love when typically it's these indie movies, man,
right?
Because I feel they don't have handcuffs on from these studios.
They're auteur pieces. They're movies that are driven by one person's vision, as opposed to something like Event Horizon that is certainly a story in a movie that was created by committee. The studio definitely came down and what is Paul Anderson an auteur filmmaker? I can't think of.
I don't think so. Didn't he do Mortal Kombat right before Event Horizon? And I would not call that. That's just a kind of a big budget kind of Hollywood film. Yeah. I don't know what he's done since.
It's candy.
Yeah, then some of these other, to me, that like the A24s come to mind. I really enjoy most of those films because I feel like I'm not going to get the norm that I'm getting elsewhere. And I'm not saying I don't like the norm. There are some big Hollywood horror movies that Megan comes to mind. I really enjoyed. I had fun with that.
I still haven't seen that one.
Dude, you need to check it out. I think you would like it, man.
I always figured it would be somewhere along the lines of, remember that movie Upgrade that came out a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Similar to that?
No, I would say, kind of. Upgrade to me felt a little more darker.
Sure.
Megan has a lot more comedy going on, but I think they do a good job with it. I saw it in the theater a couple times, and I know there's an uncut version, which from what someone told me, it's not really a lot more. I was hoping for, when I watched the movie, I felt what was missing for me was just a little gore. I'm not a huge fan of gore, but give me a little bit. And I felt like it was missing that. And I thought, okay, they're going to put it in this uncut version. And there's a little bit from what I've been told, because I haven't watched the uncut version.
Okay.
But it's a fun movie. You have fun with it, and I think you would dig it. But that comes to mind. I am not against a bigger Hollywood horror film versus an independent one that it costs nothing to make. As long as it's good, I don't care what it is.
And I think those little ones are going to, those independent movies, I just generally are going to be better. I'm not against, like you said, a big budget horror movie, but too often you're going to wind up with like Tom Cruise's The Mummy or Dracula Unbound or whatever that was. Sure. There's just, it's not going to be that good. But if you get somebody who's got a sick and twisted story to tell, then find me the guy that's going to do it on $250,000 and he's going to be running the show.
For sure, man. So I guess we should get back to Event Horizon. I don't even know where we left off. Well, what we know is the ship is causing hallucinations, or it's manipulating them, right? And then
they've had to move from the Lewis and Clark, which is the rescue ship, onto the Event Horizon. So now you're not on your ship anymore. Now you're stuck in this. And they discover that they're breathing too much carbon dioxide, and they've got 20 hours,
something like that, like 20 hours to figure out what they're going to do. And in the meantime, I think Cooper and I can't remember if it was Smith is trying to fix the Lewis and Clark. But we feel that Weir, or Sam Neill's character, has some sort of other ulterior motive that he's not sharing. But Jake,
he is the antagonist of this film, because really when the other characters come along and say, when Cooper says, "I saw this, black hole of liquid," and Justin emerged from it, and then Peters says that she had a vision of her kid. Well, we know that Sam Neill's character also had a vision, but he's explaining away them. He's condescendingly saying,
dismissing it all.
I think that you're seeing things, or that it's a stress reaction and you're not really seeing it. So that puts him, at odds with the characters who are like, F you, man. I know what I saw.
Yeah. But man, do you think this is what I'm like, is his motive here just to get back on the ship because he feels this connection to the ship because it's his baby, or was there some other motive, man, that they just didn't explain? Because when you kind of get rid of all of it, it's just I love my ship, I want to be part of it, and well, I think that's really all it came down to, right? I mean,
I think also while the other characters that experience hallucinations are at odds with those hallucinations, they're uncomfortable, they don't want the hallucinations, he's seeing his wife, and it feels very much like he's the one that's immediately giving into those hallucinations. He wants to be with her again. He wants to indulge that, whatever's happening. So at the same time, he's saying, no, this is my ship, and listen, whatever you're saying is not really happening. The ship was designed for that to not happen, and it's perfectly safe. Come on down. And
the water's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like, there's no shark in the water. Come on, I'll go swimming right now.
I felt like it was a missed opportunity. Like I would have, to me, okay, you designed or built the ship. I get it. It comes back. You want to check it out. You want to see what's happened. But I felt like something really could have like pulled him to the ship would have been his wife being, say, part of the crew, and then it disappeared. Like he felt like, is she still alive? There's something that's unsettled or unsettled there, or unclear, or of what, something other than just her committing suicide because he worked too much.
Yeah,
I just didn't buy that, man.
It was the motivations of the characters were always kind of unclear and easily explained away. But as we get to the point where, suddenly the movie becomes like an escape movie where there's a countdown, and we've got this amount of time before we need to be out of here. And that's where it kind of becomes a mess for me too.
Because then he gets taken over by the ship. We know Justin ends up dying, right? Justin doesn't die because he's in that little chamber, and then they somehow rescue him and they stick him in that the stasis that you were talking about. Sure. So we assume he still survived. Yeah, so that is right. There was
survived.
Now that I'm thinking about, But then I think Weir plan an explosive on the Lewis and Clark, and then ends up blowing up. I want to say it's Smith. I know it's definitely Smith. I don't remember if it's. I don't think it's DJ.
It's hard.
Was it
There's a
Peters?
lot. There's too many characters to keep track
See,
of.
this is the thing, man, because I mean there's a okay. They've established that the ship is
sentient.
yeah, they know the things that are happening aren't real. We know Peter's son isn't on the ship.
Yeah.
But then towards the end, when they're getting ready to like escape, she sees her son, and I'm like, "Come on, you know he's that. That's it's just an illusion. It's not real. But why the hell are you following him?"
I don't. They put it in there. Maybe it's because it's something to, for the audience. They're giving you the audience something to scream, to invest in, to scream at the screen and say, "No, it's not real. Get out of there, girl."
Just leave. I mean, I don't know. I guess for the sake of the movie, it's like we get a death, right? She goes to follow the sun that doesn't exist. It's just the ship messing with her mind, and she doesn't realize when she steps that it's literally she falls to her death. I don't even know how far this was.
I don't either.
But then what was interesting is like at this point, I feel like Weir's character is taken over by the ship, but he feels remorse for her. Right? Didn't he feel that way?
I remember that part.
Like, because I mean, she falls into kind of that liquid or that water, and he comes and he feels like kind of remorseful that she died.
Maybe it's just a moment of clarity for him, where his old self, his human self, comes through, while the rest of him is kind of devolving and descending into this.
Yeah, because he gets consumed basically 100%. Not too long after, and then he plants the explosives. He grabs the explosives and plants them on the Lewis and Clark, which blows up the ship. Kills a few of them. I don't remember who it was. How did? Because I thought Smith died. Because I thought Smith was.
He did.
DJ's death. Do you remember? He was the one that grabbed the scalpel and put it. What was his death? Do you recall? Dude, I'll be honest, man.
You got me.
It was kind of like, it wasn't really like I left this movie going, a lot of it just wasn't like, I don't know. It wasn't impactful for me like I would remember every single thing.
This was where they start doing, okay, all of the plot points, all the beats need to be hit. We need to kill this person, that person. And the hallmarks of a great horror movie is that you will remember every single death. They did not execute this very well. They executed it like it was a science fiction action movie.
Was his death the one where it was kind of Hellraiser-ish, where he was cut and peeled back and kind of like propped up in the medical room? Do you remember that? Was that his? That might have been his death. That's where like I kept seeing.
Now I feel like I should have remembered that.
Yeah, well, it just came to. But I mean, dude, it just came to my mind right now. That felt very much like Hellraiser. And of course, like we said, Clive Barker was on the set. He was a consultant of this, which I thought was very interesting.
Well, if you look at the engine room, like that definitely looks very Barker-esque or Hellraiser-ish.
Why? I guess is it because they just wanted a feel of the movie and they're like, well, who else do we get? Well, let's get Clive Barker.
Maybe he was available at the time, or maybe the set designers were people who were really inspired by Clive Barker's work, and somebody knew somebody and he dropped by to take a look, and they said, hey, look at what we did. Who knows?
Well, man, I don't know. So we get kind of towards the end, right? I mean, Weir's fully absorbed by this ship. I don't think there's any coming back for him.
They're going to execute the plan where they blow up the corridor and use the front of the ship to try and get home. Or get rescued somehow. Yeah. But
which I think Lawrence Fishburne's character Miller does, right? He goes down the hall and he runs down, and then he gets into this. He engages with Weir, and
first he sees his own hallucination of the guy burning, which then turns into Weir's character, no eyes, face all cut up, Cenobite looking, and he realizes that, he's going to have to sacrifice himself. So he does. Yeah. The corridor is blown. The engine room blows up. The Event Horizon's gravity drive is lost. Or they engage the gravity drive, and they see it full, it goes back into whatever the hellish dimension is. Yeah. And the survivors drift away on the front of the Event Horizon.
They drift away. Now that I'm talking about it, you would have Cooper, Stark, and then Justin, who's in that stasis chamber.
Like a completely pointless survival for
it
a horror
just
movie.
felt rushed and just sloppy to me. What was the
like they
was there
didn't-
anything at the end that was like some like one, like those typical horror movie endings?
Yeah.
What was it? Because now I don't even remember it,
It
Jake.
was, so they get into stasis and then they move beyond to, time jump or whatever.
Yeah.
And the time jump lands when the rescue ship for them arrives on the event horizon.
That's right.
Starts taking everybody out of stasis. And I don't even think it did a very good job of this, but you see the door close behind them, when she, was
Stark?
it Stark? Yeah.
Yeah.
When she comes out of it, she has, a hallucination still of the rescuer being weird, all cut up and gross looking.
Yeah.
But then the door closes behind him, and that's the end of the movie. So it could be implied that whatever, infected the ship, whatever possessed the ship is still there, and now it's going to move on, and we're going to start all over with this new rescue crew. So
Yeah, but it just wasn't a great job of it. Right?
I feel like there were the things that I loved about this movie were the set design, and I thought it looked beautiful. The ship looked great. The gravity drive set looked fantastic. But it ended there. I feel like they could have done so much more with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, I was kind of hoping for a lot more with this. I had never seen it, so I was just like, okay, I'm going to go into this thing kind of blind, other than I watched the trailer, I wanted dude, I expected so much more from this, especially with the ensemble. I would agree. I think the set design was,
With the exception of Lawrence Fishburne's chair.
yeah, the chair was just so weird to me. Yeah. Other than that, I thought it was,
What I would have liked, we do see how whatever entity that has possessed the ship, we see how it affects the crew in their own way.
Yeah.
What I would have liked to see is, what was on those recordings that they found, where it was very like they were having some kind of an orgy / torture session. I would have liked to explore that, not just, for tits and ass, but I would have liked to explore the way the ship, because it's implied that the ship went to hell.
Yeah.
They call it a hellish dimension.
Yeah.
So I in the same way that in Hellraiser, opening the box takes you through to a different dimension into what we would conceive as hell. It would have been interesting to explore that more and how it affects people and how whatever sin or dark past you have, it brings that up to the surface and you become the worst version of yourself. And if everybody, exploring that more, where it's not necessarily the hell and the things that happen to you. It's what going to this place turns you into, or what it brings out in you, just some sort of sickness that it would bring to the surface. I thought that would have been really interesting to explore, and we got none of that. We got some flashbacks, and apparently that is what was on the footage that got cut. So I think it was definitely a missed opportunity.
I think so too. I think it probably would have been better. I think I probably would have liked it more if it gave me more of that. And I turned it off and I just felt super disappointed. Like I just was like,
I didn't feel disappointed.
No?
And maybe I'm just, kind of hanging on to the stuff that I liked about it. And I'm like, a great set design is 60% of the film. It's not, but they did a really good job there.
No, I agree with the set design. The other stuff, not so much. I just felt like the acting was just subpar for me. The dialogue, I'm like, who the hell wrote this thing? Like I felt it was just bad. Because you have really good actors here. Challenge them with some dialogue. But it was just some of it was so bad. Definitely didn't resonate with me, and that's okay. I mean, I'm glad I at least watched it because, how would I know if I had never seen it? Don't think I would recommend it to someone. It just wasn't my cup of tea, man, and that's okay. Like I always say, they all can't be home runs,
Yeah.
and that's all right, man.
And 1 to 10, I would give this movie a solid 5. And, really, I wasn't recommending it because I thought you would love it, because I didn't. I just thought this is going to be a movie that we can talk about.
Absolutely. And that's what's great, man. Whether
It's content,
yeah,
I guess is what we would call it. It's
Exactly,
content.
man. Because I almost would, I don't want to come on every episode and go, man, that was so, I don't want to love every film. Like I still get crap from not liking Evil Dead. As much as
Which one?
The original Evil
original.
Dead. You have to listen to the episode with
honestly.
Darren and Morrison. They gave me crap through the episode because I found myself rewatching it and quite bored.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and
it really
that's
hit its stride in Evil Dead 2 and then Army of Darkness anyway. Like,
I love
love
Evil
those.
Dead too. But that's okay. Everyone has their own opinions, and I'm sure there's going to be people out there that just love this movie, and they're probably listening to me and going, "Rick, what are you talking about, dude? You're crazy." And that's okay. That's nothing wrong with that, man. And we're all entitled to our opinion. And I just didn't care for it. You know,
people have every right to be wrong.
Exactly, man. So, anyways, that's our Event Horizon, folks. Dude, I appreciate you coming on out.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man, it's always a pleasure. And I guess that's it. Unless there's anything else you want to add, no?
No, sir.
All right, bud. Anyways, everyone, thanks for listening and take care.
Good night, folks.
You listened all the way to the end. We appreciate that. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Ear for Fear Podcast, Twitter at Ear for Fear, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Ear for Fear Podcast. You can also check out our website, earforfear.com. There we list news and events. We're available on all the main platforms, so make sure you tell a friend. We hope you come back and get an earful.